grab your goat, grab your wand, grab something to drink, grab some popcorn, because indeed it is Wednesday, and indeed it is time for the Witches Movie Coven Live. I am Patti Negri. I am one of your hosts. Let me introduce you to my co-host, the wonderful Richard-Lael Lillard, the beautiful Courtney Buckley, the fabulous hair Jason Mankey, and the oh-so-smart Heather Greene. We are your Witches Movie Coven. And today we are talking about Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows. Ooh. What is that? What is that?
Wow.
So Blair Witch is excited that we're talking about her.
Is it this? I don't know
Yeah.
what that is. It will never happen again. Anyway, I just thought I would rush this along, and we got balloons. That's fabulous. Yeah, Blair, I had never seen it before. It's great to see all your favorite people. Thank you, Matthew. Hi, everybody. Everybody in the chat room, talk away, because we watch, we listen, we put it up on the board. Hopefully you saw the movie. If not, we'll talk you into it or out of it. Now, we'll do introductions. We'll just save it for later this time because I like to mix it up a little bit. But in case anybody has not seen this particular movie, Richard-Lael, do you have an unbiased synopsis of the film itself?
I certainly do.
Oh, good.
This one is a delightful classic that is way better than the one that preceded it. However, I will say that the plot line of this is about Scooby-Doo and the gang meeting Elvira, going into the woods where they are, there's supposed to be a cabin in the woods, but there's not. It's just an old foundation where they filmed the film. And this one, in this universe, it supposes that, yes, Blair Witch happened, but yes, Blair Witch was only a film. It was only made to shock people, and it was not an actual documentary. But this kid is making money off of the dolts who think that it was real. And so he goes with his first tour group that he has said thousands have gone on, but it's his first tour group. They go to this old place, and while they're there, they actually meet some tourists. There are some Asian tourists, and there's a German tourist, and they are angry because the other group is here first. So, I mean, the European group is angry that the other group is there first. So the one says, "Oh no, they're not ever coming back. They're never coming back." And then somehow there's a crazy orgy party with drugs and or something like hallucinogens, and then there's a miscarriage of justice. There's a miscarriage, and then there's blood in the van. I don't know. It was a weird trip, okay? It was a weird trip. The only thing that I really got out of it was that it would show you from one perspective, like they would go into town and the van ends up with just a small dent. There are these weird ghost children, and she goes to avoid them, and she dents the van. And then when you see the van, it's devastated. It looks like it's been hit by, I don't know. It looks like it's been damaged. And then there's these like video cameras. So when she goes in, they'll say like, "Oh, we don't want your kind here." And then the woman will hit the recording, and somehow the recording is not what happened. So that's not real. None of it is real. That didn't happen. So none of it happened, excepting it did. And then they all get arrested for murder because they're all killing each other, but they're really not. And you don't know, is it hallucinations, or is it, did it happen the way that it happened on video? I that's about it. Roll credits.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now we understand the film and the plot.
I don't understand it. I don't understand
My
it.
movie was a little different, just a little different. And that is the classic horror film. I must say that I've even done some very bad low budget films myself, where you're off camping and then the monsters attack and things. But Thank you, Richard-Lael. Speechless. All right,
Like I
Heather.
said, I don't even get it. I don't get it. I did watch it on my phone. I was pulling a Patti though.
Oh, you were pulling a Patti.
That
That
was
makes
it.
all the difference in the world. You were pulling a Patti. All right, Heather, help. Do you have?
Help. Well, I'm not going to talk about this, the plot or anything, or the lack thereof. It actually did have a little bit of a plot, but I want to talk about a few things. There's a few notable points here with this particular movie, but we have to backtrack, and I always like to give context. So, in terms of witch films and witchcraft stuff. So this is the end. The Blair Witch Project, the first one, marked the end of the craze of witchcraft films. We were really popular in the late 80s through the 90s. And it was really difficult for me to draw the line because the Blair Witch happens in 1999 and sets off a totally different craze in witch films, in witch related films. It wasn't part of the wave that happened earlier, part of the Satanic Panic and the Craft and everything. This was after that. And I think there was a lot of reasons why, but when the Blair Witch Project happened, it was so successful. The film cost them $600,000. It made like $240 million. It was super successful, and everybody was all over this, and it was successful because of what it was. And we can talk about the Blair Witch Project. It was what it was in a show about that film, but it was brilliant. And it was brilliant in a number of ways. And I discuss it in my book of why it was brilliant. But it was so successful that everybody wanted to make a sequel. Everybody wanted to make spin-offs. There was a rash of films. And I actually was pulling out my book to give you an idea. Aside from this film, you had the Bogus Witch Project, the Tony Blair Witch Project, the Erotic Witch Project, the Blair Thumb, the Black Witch Project, and eventually we had the 2016, the Blair Witch. You had also Bell Witch movies, and on top of ones that were directly related, you had the growth of paranormal films, and specifically a ton of films centered around ghost witches coming back and haunting, witches possessing, witches doing this type of stuff. Now, this is not different from the witch craze, but I won't talk about that. So you had the Blair Witch Project set off, amongst other things was set these paranormal witchy films off. Okay, so this comes into play here. Blair Witch 2 obviously is the direct spinoff. It's the first one after it. There were a number of projects, and they chose the director, and why can't I think of his name right now? Joe Berlinger. He was a documentary filmmaker, and they chose him. And we were talking before the show. He directed Paradise Lost, which is about the West Memphis Three. If you don't know who the West Memphis Three were, go back and look. It's part of the Satanic Panic stuff that happened with teenagers getting accused of murder and being involved in the occult and such. So he was chosen partly because of that to do this project. He had a little bit of a different take on it. Obviously, mainstream studios wanted to make a film that was going to fit with this new trend, which included appealing to teenagers, included the horror paranormal, and they wanted to make this mainstream film. And so here we have Blair Witch Project, or Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, as I think the right title. And most hardcore lovers of this film, of the original, wish this movie had never been made. They don't even count it as a sequel. So that's kind of where this stands. And there's so many things to talk about with the Blair Witch Project that I have a hard time suppressing that, because the Blair Witch Project was so brilliant. So we'll stop there. That's where the Blair Witch 2 fits into our programming. Yes.
Heather, in your list of movies that were made, you forgot one. It was called the Claire Witch Project, which I made because I'm going to try to say this without laughing. I was an awful teenage kid, and I had a crazy neighbor who lived in this weird shack of a house with like her overgrown yard, and her name was Claire. And I had a handheld video camera, and we used to like see her riding her bike around the neighborhood. We'd like hide in the bushes, and then we filmed the scene on train tracks. where we were running down the train tracks going, I'm lost in the woods. I'm lost in the woods. And then I stopped and the person holding the camera slammed into me. And then we turned around and I was like, I got like real close into the camera and I was like, I can't find the map. I don't know where the map is. We're so lost. And then the camera pans over and like the street is right there with traffic. And then she was like, I used the map to wipe my butt. And then we thought it was the best thing that was ever made because we captured like these like
I'm writing it down. The Blair Witch Project for an updated version of my book.
Do you still have this somewhere?
I really wish that I did because it would be incredible.
Because I want to watch this movie now. I want to watch this next week on the show.
It was very dramatic, but it was like like the images that we got of this poor woman who like when she's just trying to live her life were like Bigfoot images. Like
that's awesome. You know, that's an exact sample of why the Blair Witch Project was so perfectly positioned, because that was the time when people started more and more to have the power to manipulate media and to make their own films. It was way more prevalent. This was this was happening right as digital media on all fronts was becoming so much more accessible, so much more DIY. And it was just, that's one of the brilliant aspects of it. And you just demonstrated why the Blair Witch Project was so brilliant and why people, and also was positioned at a point where it was so accessible to do it, yet so many people still believe the way we used to believe, where what we saw was real. The mindset was still like that. We're totally ruined now. That, you know, the jig's up on that whole mess. We don't believe anything we see at this point, but then we still did. So, well, yeah, okay. That's another conversation. But but then it was still, the innocence was still there, yet we can manipulate media, and Blair Witch Project just owned that 100%, manipulated everybody. It was so brilliant. Sorry.
I think for me too, like that, I was so traumatized by the first one because I was a kid. I was like a younger teenager by the first one, and was I was maybe 13. And when I saw it, and it was like, it was traumatizing because it was so believable that I believed it was real. I was impressionable, you know, whatever. But then that paved the way for movies like Paranormal Activity, which, don't get me going, I have a lot of thoughts about. Like, I could talk myself for 2 hours about that whole franchise. But leading up to that first movie, the guerrilla marketing, like it wasn't like advertised on TV, it was all online with like these weird websites and everything else that like made it believable, like made it feel real. So by the time you went to see it, like you didn't know what to think. And I love that found footage. Like it's now iconic, which I realized because I asked my 14-year-old yesterday if he wanted to watch Blair Witch 2 with me, and he was like, well, I have to see the first one first. And I was like, you don't really have to. And he's like, no, because it's like the beginning of analog horror. It's like the first analog horror. And I was like, gross, that I was your age when I saw it. And now you're like, this whole genre has been built off it. Like, I've never felt older. So if we could stop. But I tried to be like, it's really boring and like, whatever. And he's like, no, I want to watch it. And then, so we started it. And then it reminded me that when I watched the second one, I mean, the second one, I feel like has to be considered completely differently from the first one, because you don't have that element of like that new, like, because the found footage was new, like it was new and it was scary because it was, you didn't know whether or not to believe it. But the second one kind of carries the spirit of that over, where it's that paranoia, like which point of view are you believing? You know, because we're seeing all different kinds. Was it you know, I think I enjoyed it a lot more when I saw it when it came out in 2000 or whenever it came out. It was terrifying then, and watching it now, I was like, oh, like, okay, I fell asleep at the end, but like it at the time was, you know, I watched it because it had the Blair Witch name, and I remember being a little bit disappointed that it wasn't sort of the same thing, but I would have gone on that tour. I would have paid money to be squired around those woods and to camp out in that house, because I think at the time that this movie came out, I still believed it in some recess of my mind. So it was almost like, I don't know, being put into the movie, or being, I don't know what words I want to use for that, but like it was like watching like history.
Well, I think the brilliance of this movie, in a way, is that it says something can be a fiction, but we can create it in reality, right? And that's what happens here. There is no Blair Witch. It's a fictional movie, but these people want to believe in the Blair Witch, and they warp reality so that there is a Blair Witch. This is really a parable for like the last 8 years of our lives in so many ways, in a world of alternative facts and whatever else. You can just wish something into existence, and people in this film wished the Blair Witch into existence.
They create an egregore or a servitor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that is very much what has transpired, because in the film, what I was alluding to earlier on is that all of these atrocities get committed, but you've seen it from their perspective, and they are the innocent ones, and nothing has happened. And she goes to the store. They refuse to take her money, and so she says, "No, I'm gonna take my cash. I'm going to leave it here. You just stay here, and I'm going to go. And I don't want to be here either. I just have to take. I just want this drink." And then she goes back to the old factory where she has stabbed her. She reaches into the bag and she stabs herself with the nail file that's covered in blood. And she goes, "Where did this even come from?" And then when you go back and look at the footage, somehow she had grabbed Peggy, I think her name was, which is a real contemporary name for something that was in 1950 something, real contemporary name. Anyway, but she ends up by being murdered, and it's right there on camera. You see Morticia stab this woman to death, and then you see the woman at the end. Oh, she's the witch. She's the witch. She's the witch. And then you see it from the footage, and it says, "Oh, please, please, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And you don't know what is what, but it is an egregore or a servitor, and they created, whether it be in their own mind, with hallucinogens, with drugs, whatever it may be, they created the witch.
Or a real spirit. They could have we create real spirits all the time. Absolutely. I live in that world. I live in that paranormal world. I live in the world of weird travel that go on. I'm getting ready to go to Romania with a witch and a vampire and doing all sorts of weird magic stuff in the forest and the thing. So this does exist.
And it kind of is, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Patti, but you're right on that too, is that the Zozo phenomenon, Zozo, in no lexicon prior to the turn of the last century into this one, there was no reference to Zozo. No. Yes, Pazuzu, yes, all of these things. There was no reference to Zozo. But does the board spell out Zozo now? Do people feel attacked by Zozo? Yes, absolutely. Yes. Does it exist in it now? More than likely, yeah.
We've created it, yeah.
When you invest a place with that kind of energy, something is going to happen in that place, right? If there's all of that belief that something is here, there's going to be something there.
Right. And especially us as witches who know we manifest, we create, we take fate into our own hands, we shift, we do this. It makes that much more sense to me that, like, again, I go to the crazy haunted places and places that horrible things have happened. More horrible things happen, and it just manifests, creates itself. So I personally, I really like this movie because you can't redo the first one. That's been done. You can't, is it real or is it not? I thought it was kind of clever in a simple, low budget horror film kind of way, how they played off what it was and what they turned it into a real thing. And I was scared. I wasn't on my phone. I was on my whole laptop, and I wasn't at 2 a.m. And I love to get scared. And I was really, really scared because there's nothing more scary than the woods. There's nothing more scary. I mean, it's true. Oh, you think there is, Richard-Lael?
I mean, I used to go to church. That's pretty scary.
Okay, I've been to church in the woods. Well, the woods are my church, but by yourself in the middle of.
I lived in the woods. I grew up in the woods. I mean, I was like Christopher Robin on the 100-Acre Wood. It was like 5 acres, so it wasn't quite 100-acre. But I grew up in the woods, and we lived a mile from town. And yeah, I mean, I have to admit, even as a teenager, I would strip naked and I would run through the woods and howl at the moon. And so I always felt a connection with it, even when. Oh goodness, I have a personal story, but I'm not going to tell you. It's never mind. Mm-mm. Never mind.
I'm gonna. I like to change topics for a minute here and talk about the witchcraft in this. And I'm gonna say I agree that I agree with everyone saying that we can create things and all that part of it, but I don't believe that this movie did that. I believe this movie failed horribly at that moment, at that message, and I think it may have been partly the message of the original director, but I think the attempt to turn this into a genuine a mainstream documentary failed, and I believe that the ghost was supposed to be real. That was my reading on it. Not that I'm disagreeing with you guys about the ability to create things. Absolutely, I just don't think this movie did that. But besides that, I want to change the topic over to witchcraft and the Wiccan in this. And a lot of people, a lot of magical people, witches, like this movie, particularly because of its approach. Its approach to the one character who says she's Wiccan and she uses words we all know. I still have no idea why she was calling Persephone in that one circle for protection. That was a little bizarre. I felt like it could have been a better deity than Persephone at that point. But hey,
Persephone's great.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything against Persephone. I just would have chosen somebody else in that instance. But besides that, the interesting thing about her using them being so clear and using Wicca and using this terminology at this point in time, it was then trendy. Now, remember, people usually say The Craft was really the first one. It actually wasn't. It was X-Files that I found was the first time we actually hear the designation between, or the differentiation between, Wicca and witchcraft. And remember, in Hollywood, this becomes, by the end of the 90s, Wicca is natural, it's good, it's a religion, it's magical, but it's good and it's positive. And again, like she says in the movie, it's about nature, et cetera, et cetera. When and witchcraft is bad, it's evil, it's satanic, it's the stuff out of the Satanic Panic. It's usually ceremonial, it usually has lots of candles and pentagrams and stuff. There's a clear delineation happening in Hollywood by the late 90s. You see it in The Craft, you see it in a lot of the teen horror films in the late 90s, and then it really hits its stride at this point. You start really seeing it, especially in TV shows, by the 2000s, 2000 through 2005 or so. You're going to see a lot of mentions of Wicca. Wicca is good. Wicca is nature. Wicca is a religion. It's peaceful. They deserve rights. You see a ton of it. So this is picking up on another trend here that we have in a lot of these witch films with witches in them at this point, TV shows with witches. So that's really an interesting point. However, I feel like they did that, but they kind of let it slip and slide a little bit by how they demarked the character, how she was very sexualized, how she was and also there was the one point they even Christianized it a little bit, where I can't remember, I wrote a note and I'd have to find it, but you have a little bit of backslipping with that notion, and it wasn't perfect, but at least the words get out there where they weren't 20 years ago. So I think that's an interesting talking point, and I think a lot of modern witches love to see that. And I think in the late 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, we would have went, hey, yay, and cheered because, hey, you never heard that, or you rarely heard it. So, hey.
I also think Berlinger, the director and the writer, had a lot of sympathy for Wicca. He said in some interviews that he was listening to the cries of the Wiccan community. There's an egregore in my room tonight, apparently. He was listening to backlash from the Wiccan community about how witches had been portrayed in cinema. And then because he knew Damien Eccles, who identified, I think, as a Wiccan during much of the 90s, he was probably extra sympathetic to Wicca. Mm-hmm. And
absolutely.
So its inclusion makes a lot of sense because of his connections. to Wicca.
And he wrote it, and he wrote this, so it does make sense. And the Paradise Lost connection would certainly make sense of why there was sympathy. And again, it was trending, so they left it alone. So it's an interesting twist in this movie.
But didn't you find it strange that the psychic goth girl really didn't have a religion for her, and really the Wiccan was seen as sort of as the crazy one? Isn't that, I mean, that to me, I went, I
didn't really understand why she was even there. I didn't understand why those two were there. Why were they called to be part of on the tour? Did they want to go on the tour? I wasn't quite sure what their point of being there was.
The Wiccan.
Interesting character. Oh no, I know a lot of goth girls. That's my world. And a lot of goth girls are just that. They're goth girls. Maybe she had the gift, obviously. She had an intuitive psychic gift. But that doesn't mean she's Wiccan. That doesn't mean she's a witch. She's goth. So I fell right into that. And I just want to comment to Robert's thing, how he said it didn't feel like a document. I never looked at it as a documentary. It was a horror film. It was a horror film.
Yeah, this is a horror film.
The most horrible thing about it, though, was watching it. I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have given
the Wiccan girl says at the beginning of the film, though, that she is going to commune with the Blair Witch, right? That she has sympathy for the Blair Witch, which is then why she's on the tour. So that's spelled out pretty clearly, I think.
Yeah. And I think I don't remember.
Less so.
She's no, but she says, I don't remember exactly what it is, but she says something when she's laying on the gravestone. Like it's quick, but she explains why she's there too.
Yeah.
So she is there to take the tour, I think, because he's talking about something like she emailed him at the last minute, or when was the last time he talked to her, like whatever, they had to like pick her up, and she emailed him and something. So they were all there to just take the tour.
The one thing that was a negative negative pagan thing is that they did call the ancient alphabet of Ellie that she was etching everywhere. The evil alphabet was called an ancient pagan alphabet. It looked very much like runes. So you still have the little digs here and there. There was another one too, and I can't remember. One little thing I thought was funny, other than the fact that when you go into his big house and you have, of course, if you look around his house, there's these tiny little things that are very creepy in a weird kind of way. Like, what were the heads in the like little TV thing in the one room? And there's just all these. Then there was this little like stuffed rabbit at one point. So there's a lot of creepy things. But it turns out, as at the very end, they talk about on the TV, they call it a former broom factory, which I just found to be very. I just went,
now. Oh my God! It's a broom factory.
Usually you build broom factories in the middle of the woods, like over a giant chasm with a bridge, right? I mean, it makes it easy to get the brooms in and out of there. You know, it makes perfect sense to me.
It was neither here nor there for anything, but I kind of had a giggle at that. I'm like, perfect. It's a broom factory.
Very big broom factory. Very big broom factory.
Yeah.
And he bought it for $1. They were going to tear it down. He bought this old broom factory in the middle of the woods for $1.
I believe that. I hear stuff like that all the time. I know somebody who bought a boat for $1 and they live on it.
I think for me, the horror part of it, I was the most scared by and I don't know why. It's hard to explain, and I think it's like visceral because of the original movie. But the scariest parts for me were when they were at the locations, when they were out in the woods at the locations. And I remembered how I felt about, when they were waking up and the sticks were all around them, or they were hearing all those noises. And because there was not a scene in a movie that had scared me like him standing in the corner. That was insane. And so like, you're like, but I just want to be like, get away from it. Like, don't touch it, get away from it. Go away, get away from it. And that, I think, starts that like that panic. And so I don't know that I feel like the movie was scary, but it was like anxiety inducing, because then you start to not understand. Then it's all mind games and everything else, which I appreciate. It's different than like jump scares that are terrible. It's horror in a different, it's like psychological, and I do like that. but I have to say, like, it doesn't. I feel like there's so much more they could have done with it, or they could have done it differently enough. Like, I would love if we could talk about someday the 2016 Blair Witch, because there's a difference there too.
Yes.
In ways, like, so this one, just to me, like, I do appreciate it for what it is. Like, I appreciate what they did. Like, that psychological piece is great. Going to, like, the locations is great, but I feel like they missed the mark. Like, it could have been. I saw it because of the original, and it didn't live up to it. It didn't need to be the same, but it didn't live up to it.
Yeah. I think the original one, and I compare it to one of my favorite books, the Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and it's almost like this going into the woods, into this darker and darker place, to the point where you're stripped of everything and you become fearful, and there is no witch in that one. Is the witch real? You don't know. Or is it just the intense fear? Is it the deep dark woods? And I have a whole section on deep dark woods and what they mean in symbolically in these films. But it's this just, you go further and further into this place of darkness, this place in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit, whatever it is, and you don't know if that witch is real, and we don't know, and they never tell us. And that's one of the other beauties of the original movie. This one, I think maybe the director, from what I understand, wanted to have something that was a little bit more of that vein, although different, but of that vein, where there isn't such a concrete concept of what they're afraid of. This one, I think, felt like it was patched together where it didn't really know which way it was going. And that's unfortunate. The new one, 2016, actually concretely tells you that there is something to be scared about. So, but it's a totally different type of movie. Totally different. I agree with you, Courtney, and we should talk about it at some point. But I think that this one missed the mark. And I think one of the scariest aspects of the first movie was the fact that we were stuck in this frame, not seeing anything. We were as limited and scared, and as the people in the film. Like, they cut you off with the way they filmed it. So you were as tense and stressed. It's very stressful for viewers to be stuck in a visual like this constantly, not being able to give us a full shot, not being able to give us the open us up and see the various pieces. It's very stressful for us to do that for so long, and that they use that to create that stress. And here we go, more and more and more. It was beautiful. It was so beautifully done as filmmaking goes, and this one did not do that. And I think it really felt like it didn't know what it was doing. It tried, but it really didn't know what it was doing.
Well, I think too, I say this a lot, like, one of the best things about a horror movie is when they don't show the thing, right? Like, if they show the thing, it usually ruins it, because it's not as scary as you think it is in your mind when they finally show it. And in the original, they don't show it, and it's terrifying. It's horrible. It's terrifying. And I think they did that exactly right. Like, that's how it should have been. But in the second one, to me, it felt like, when they played the tape backwards, whatever reason, they're playing the tape backwards. And now they're transported back. They're suddenly missing footage or whatever they're doing. Then it's like, they're all on drugs. So that's what's happening. Like, that was where it left me. Like, it didn't feel like anymore that there was a witch. It didn't feel anymore like there was a ghost in the woods. It didn't feel anything else. It felt like they were all on a bad trip.
No,
and the end. That's
no. It was that bad egregores doing that to them. Drinking a bunch of beer and smoking some weed does not make you kill people.
No, but like, maybe there was. Maybe they rested their. Maybe they rested their.
They showed I was grossed out by showing the disemboweling and all that. I thought that if you're gonna show it, I thought they showed it well. It was scary.
So we have three I think there's three completely different reads about what's going on in this movie, because Courtney's seeing this as a just horrific drug trip. And then the three of you, I believe, were saying that you thought it was an egregore that they conjured, creating this violence that forces them to do this violence. And I think there actually was, I think it read as an actual spirit that was forcing them, and it got away in the end and caused all the kind of stuff. So that's 3 different reads of this movie, which proves my point that the movie really didn't know what it was doing.
No,
and the
I
thing
think
is,
that's
like,
I think that's brilliant, though. I think that they should be open to interpretation, and
I
that
do
you're not being pounded over the head with like this is how it is, right?
It's
And
art, I guess.
but I also feel like all of those takes are that's where I would have wanted to go, but like it just fell when it was the part where they played the footage back. When they played the footage back to me, it was just like, oh god, like okay, it's like showing the monster. It was like, well, I can't believe fully in the egregore. I can't believe fully in the spirit anymore because they could have, licked a mushroom in the woods and been
Disemboweled somebody? Come on, Courtney.
Yes.
Do some more.
I've
You need to do some more drugs, Courtney.
I've
You
never
need to
done
do
drugs,
some
so
more
I
drugs.
wouldn't know, Jason. Turn your light off.
There's
I am the witch. I am the
I'm
Blair
gonna get-
Witch.
I'm gonna get hexed again. I'm gonna get hexed again after
You
this
already
show.
are hexed.
No. You don't do that. You have to be guided by somebody. A bunch of all they drank was beer and Jack Daniels and weed.
But it's movie drugs. It's not real drugs. It's movie drugs. Like that's what it felt like.
But
watching
okay,
it.
so movie drugs playing it backwards once they were sober, that shows there was something mystical,
I'm not
magical happening.
Right, but I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm saying that that's what it felt like watching it. Like I couldn't believe any of the other stuff because it felt like they were on a bad trip. So it was like showing the monster for me. It took me out of it. It took me away from it. And that piece of like playing the film backwards and then all them doing all crazy stuff.
I will tell you, I don't smoke the devil's lettuce. I don't partake in any of that. I really don't. I just don't like it. But many, many years ago, I was flying. I flew back from Sweden from an event that I was working in Sweden. And I was in San Francisco. Long story short, there was some trouble with the plane. And then the following day, my friend Sanjay says, "Oh, let's go to this party." And they were all cooks, chefs. They all baked, and they had special cookies. And I ate almost a whole one. And my friend says, "Oh no, I think you've had enough." And I went, "Oh no, it's fine. It's just a cookie." I'm like, "It's fine." Well, the next thing I know, I thought that I had been abducted by aliens. I thought that I was being hypnotized on a stage. Then I thought I died and went to hell because I don't worship Jesus. I thought I died on the plane. I thought there was a plane crash, and I was screaming. And I was like, "No!" And she said, "What would you have done to go to hell?" And I said, "I don't worship Jesus." And she says, "No, you're not in hell. It's San Francisco." I said, "No, it only looks like San Francisco." So I don't know. Maybe you might take them if you had a special cookie. If you had a special cookie and you had not had it before, and then you took too much, it would make you see crazy things.
And if you had the devil's lettuce that an untrustworthy person put something else into that you were not aware of, because that's what happens where I live, then especially in that time, then you have no control over what happens.
This movie was not about the drugs. This is not about the drugs.
The only thing that you were going to kill after the drugs that they ingested was a bag of Doritos. That's it.
Exactly.
Maybe
Thank you,
so
you don't know that.
Even eat Cool
I
Ranch
do know
Doritos.
that.
No.
Yeah.
Wait, I have a question. Can someone explain something to me? This is about the backwards tape. It just came to me while you guys were talking about this. So when they revealed what actually happened on the tape, it was supposed to be going backwards. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the counter was going forwards.
Correct, because it makes no sense.
Thank you. That was not like me going, wait a minute. And then they showed it again and it showed the counter going forward. And I'm like, I thought it was supposed to be going backwards. I'm so confused at this point.
And that's what I was paying attention to while I was watching it. And I was like, I was like, okay, drugs. Like
I would like to, I love the idea.
I don't even believe that they were watching backwards footage, I think is my problem. I don't even think they were doing it. I
throughout,
think they were
throughout
too high.
Exist
Wait.
on the other side. Time and space doesn't exist on the other side.
But it's footage.
Played it backwards and showed the reality. I could
It had
just
a timestamp.
throughout this movie, the main characters are not reliable narrators, and that's
Right.
something that's important to remember. What
Mhm.
you see from their point of view, it may not exactly be what is happening.
And the way they filmed it did not suggest that those things that we were learning were actually from their point of view. They were actually filmed from different angles away from them. I'm not even talking about the screen and shots. So it was hard to understand. And it was hard to understand if that's what was wanted, if that was the point, that the messages that we were the story as it was being laid out linearly, if that portion of it was supposed to be them telling us what happened, it wasn't filmed in a way to make that suggestion clearly. So that way, then that would have made sense that they're not telling us, they're telling us what they remember. They're not telling us the truth. And the tape is what's right. Now, I'm just going to say is that if his original version, if the director's original version, which I understand there is one, or maybe there isn't really one, but he had one in his head and it got ruined. We don't know what happened. His version of it is, if he was trying to make a commentary on we can't know reality because the manipulation of tapes is happening, a commentary on the original Blair Witch Project, and this sort of look into sort of where we are now at this point, where we don't know truth from fiction. We don't even know if a picture is correct, and AI is making that even worse. We have a really good commentary. This could have been a really good commentary on that topic. But again, it was chopped up and spliced together, and I don't know how much was his fault, how much was the editors, because editors are the ones that make the films in the end anyway. If a director doesn't have enough power, it was slapdashed together in a way that it just failed in many of these places to make that statement to me.
Maybe he didn't want to make a commentary statement. Maybe he
He
wanted
did,
to make a little commentary and a little statement.
No, he actually said that he did. He actually said that it was supposed to be a commentary.
I actually know who is to blame for all of it, and it was the Blair Witch. I just
Ellie. It was
Wait.
Ellie.
I have
Drugs.
another observation about the backwards tapes. Okay. And I think this is what I just remembered, that this is the problem that I had, and that this is when I shut down and stopped trying to pay attention. They show them on the backwards tapes hiding the videotapes, right?
Yes.
So now it's not a mystery anymore. They hid the videotapes, but then they're watching a tape that was still filming.
He had set up cameras everywhere, though. That was the point.
But all of the cameras were destroyed and all of the tapes were gone, and they were hidden underneath the stone. So they showed it being hidden underneath the stone, and then there was still a camera.
It would have been
watching the tape from that.
It would have been interesting to see Berlin's
and they smashed
original cut.
they showed video of them smashing the cameras.
And why was all of that?
Good point.
Why was it all raining down after this would happen like at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning? Why is all of that paper still snowing on them at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Because it's spooky.
No.
I have to interrupt with Colin's statement. I think we have a new sequel, Blame the Blair Witch.
I will get on it immediately. I'll see who of my neighbors looks suspicious enough, and I'll get on it.
Blame the Blair Witch.
All right. I guess we should move on. Do we have any quotes from this fine film?
I guess. Okay.
Say my quote. Say my quote.
I feel like your quote might be the only one, because
there's some good quotes in this film.
There's not. It's in the van when he's like introducing everybody, and then he says something about like there's a real live witch or whatever, and she says blessed be, and he goes, a Wiccan, wicked good, and I was like, gross. Okay, cool. Trying to be funny. Is that it?
No.
Then I probably don't have it. That was the one. Hold on, I have to move over. The gene pool is a little shallow here. Dive in and you'll crack your skull open. That was my other one.
That's a good one.
And then we're all virgins on this bus. because none of them had ever done the tour before. I think that was it.
Can I say my quote?
Yeah, please.
So right at the beginning, when they're doing the interviews with all the townspeople about how so many people have invaded the town, and all the people are talking about how they don't like it, and now it's changed the town so much. The one woman standing outside her house, and she's talking about how there's so many people, and they never know who's going to be out there and how many people are going to be out there, and she has to go in a full makeup and full nightgown.
Nice
You have to go shopping now in a full face of makeup and a nice nightgown.
We got a comment in the thing that who I forget who it was way back there that they watched it in their nicest nightgown.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why in the whole movie I laughed.
Haley's
out loud. I was
Haley's
like, oh,
killing it tonight in the comments. Haley's an MVP.
Yep,
that was
Haley.
it. I could not be invested enough to think any more of them were funny, because part of it was me trying to figure out what was going on because I couldn't remember, and I was getting this one and the newest one confused. So I kept getting off track. So I was trying really hard to pay attention. But those are the ones that stuck out for me.
Can I ask you, Courtney, or maybe we save it, whether you like the newest one better than this one? Or should we save that?
I'm happy to answer it if you want me to answer it.
Sure, answer. Go wild.
I love the new one.
Yes.
And I love the original.
I'm with you on that.
And I have a lot of feelings about this one.
I wish that we would have gotten the director's original vision, because the gore and stuff in this film was added late. The mental institute scenes were added late, and the sort of, you see bits from the future kind of interspersed throughout the movie. All of that was added late. The original ending was you watch 8 minutes of the actual footage and it's all revealed to you for the first time. And you don't really have any sort of inclination exactly what's going to go on. But they wanted it to be more of a conventional horror movie, which was really the wrong approach, because the thing about the Blair Witch Project, the original, was it was not a conventional horror movie. And too many cooks in the kitchen on this film, I think.
And that usually spells the disaster for most films. When you get too many writers and too many producers and too many directors, and they change it, usually tanks the film quicker than anything else. So,
and I would have loved that film. Like, that would have been great. And I think too, again, to add to my confusion, was the beginning. I couldn't figure out the timeline of the beginning, and like the mental hospital and all that stuff. It was jarring and a lot, and it wasn't clear. And then the same thing happened again at the end. But like the in-between part was great, but then it was just like, it's trying so hard for no reason.
Yeah. A linear story would have made a lot more sense, I think, in this case, and we didn't get that. It was Westworld before Westworld.
I did not find it back and forth to the insane asylum, to the this, to the future, to the police station, to the weird things like here's the police files and the way of finding it in the house. I enjoyed all of that.
See, I liked that part. Like, I liked how it was going back and forth between the story and the police station. Like, something happened, whatever, and you're going back. It was specifically that part in the beginning with the insane asylum, because it was like 1 year before, 1 year after, 6 months before, 1 year after. Like, it wasn't, and it was very quick, and it was too fast. Like, but touching back to the police station, I liked that part. Like, something's coming, and you're piecing the story together, but it was just that beginning part that like sets the tone, and it didn't set it the right way. I loved the news footage. I loved that. But then it was like doing something weird, and then it stopped doing something weird. I don't know. It was just weird.
Okay. On that note, do we have anything else to say before we go to the Mankey moment of, I can never remember what you call it.
The Mankey movie minute, right? Isn't that what it is?
Okay,
I don't know what it's
no,
called
magical
either.
movie trailer.
Movie trailer. There it is.
I like the Mankey movie minute magical movie trailer.
Yeah, Rob. After last week and the reception towards like my not overwhelming love for The Princess Bride, I'm scared to do these now.
Real scared, real thin ice. There you go, Richard-Lael.
I know.
The lights gone out.
Just mention Princess Bride.
All right. All right, here we go. All right. Hopefully I don't get in trouble this week. Step back in time to the year 2000. with all your favorite cliches from the year 2000. Meet Jeffrey, the cool-ass new metal dude with a tortured past, living in a converted factory in the middle of a forest. But somehow he still has electricity and a dial-up telephone. And then there's Erica, who is Wiccan and wants to make sure everyone knows it. And that's her entire personality. She's Wiccan. And don't forget Stephen, the earnest and serious graduate student with a wild side who is too stupid to back up his research notes on a computer. The year was 2000, not 1990. With Stephen is Tristine, the too pretty and too perfect pregnant girlfriend who seems destined for a tragic ending. And finally, goth girl Kim, a girl who is so goth cool, she takes naps on gravestones, smokes anywhere she damn well pleases, and of course, only wears black and drinks bottled beer? Just like all the other goths I knew at the time? Really? Bottled beer? Shouldn't have been blood red wine or something? Hot on the trail of these late 90s stereotypes is Sheriff Buford T. Justice, the fearless law of Texas. Whoops, sorry, I mean New Jersey. Buford barks out his lines with like an extra on the Dukes of Hazzard. Disemboweled, Jeffrey. Bodies were laid out in the shape of a pentagram. Sound familiar? So you and your little friends had just best sit tight, and that means you don't leave this county till I say it's okay. And I can't be the only person who watched this movie who got serious Scooby-Doo vibes. Stephen is Fred. Tristine is Daphne. Erica is Velma. Stephen is Shaggy. And Kim is Scooby-Doo because she secretly steals every scene she's in, all without saying too much. It's also worth pointing out that the characters in this movie also drove around in a van. And at the end of the movie, unmasked Buford T. Justice said, "And I wouldn't have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids." Okay, that last part didn't happen. Instead, prepare for your ears to be assaulted by the sounds of new metal in Marilyn Manson, which already sounded super dated by the year 2000, and now feels like the sort of drunken mistake I made as a college freshman. I'm sorry for listening to that crap. It's just not as edgy as I thought it was. Prepare yourself for one of the few sequels that generally seems to hate its source material, a feeling I can totally get behind. It's Blair Witch 2, Electric Boogaloo.
See, that one was very good, Jason.
That was very good,
It
Jason.
was spot on, and you hit pieces.
You all liked most of the Princess Bride one. It's just when I like criticized it a little at the end, and then it all went to heck right there. It all went to heck.
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I liked about that one is you pointed out a few things that we didn't say, is that the characters really didn't have much personality or depth or anything else, other than the goth girl was actually, like you said, the most interesting of all of them. She had the most character. So
what they lacked in personality, they made up in an overacting.
Oh, exactly. Thank you, Patty. Yes.
Overacting.
Or underacting, was it?
Overacting, and in X-rated films, I was going to say other things, but you know, they made up for it. They made up for it by 9 inches.
Well, there you go.
Weirdly, all of those actors went on to do other things, though. I mean, a lot of times in horror movies, they're kind of one and done, or only do like some really fringe projects. Most everybody who was a main character in this movie went on to do other things. Sometimes one of them was in a few Woody Allen movies. Not that I like Woody Allen, but you know, they were good actors. One of them was on Law and Order for a couple of years.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, we have one more thing to do. Wands, everybody. Wands up or wands down? What is your opinion of Blair Witch 2: Book of Shadows? Wait, it's too little. I can't see. Up, down, sideways, up, down, sideways. Are we tied? Up, down, sideways?
Well, I think
Am I the tiebreaker?
Courtney's a little positive on that, though.
Listen,
right?
well, that's because my arm's too lazy. I'm sideways.
Oh.
I didn't hate it. I liked. It's fun, but
Meh.
it's not good.
We got a meh online. We've got they were at ones
better,
up, ones up,
better
ones
than the first film. Better than the first.
Better
film.
than the first film.
Mm.
The first film.
No.
Absolutely not. Turn your light off.
We did
Well,
not
like-
comment on it, but the first
stealing
film,
my
we're
shtick.
not talking about the first film. The first film, I know a lot of people that got very dizzy from the first film. Yeah, and we had some comments there. I know Jeff said it and Jason said it, and I remember that too. Got a little dizzy. Didn't quite get it, but that's okay. I like to be dizzy. Mm.
It's all that devil's lettuce.
But it's never made me kill anybody. It's never.
Maybe you didn't get it from your friend's cousin's uncle who sold it out of this trunk in the back of the market basket.
Lives in
Maybe.
the Pine Barrens
Maybe I
of New
did.
Jersey.
All
That was
right.
Maryland.
Well, time is flying by. What are we before we even check in? Next week we are doing. What are we doing?
Kiki's delivery service.
Kiki's Delivery Service. So watch it. Kiki's Delivery Service. What year is that from, or is there just one that we wouldn't have to have a trouble finding it?
I think it's 87, 85, something like that. It's one of the early films from that time.
89.
89.
Kiki's
Thank you.
Delivery Service. Blackwell Ghost is better, says Tabitha. All right.
Can I just really quickly? Yes, the Blackwell Ghost series is phenomenal. It is 8 movies and it's great, and but it's not. I would not compare the two because to me it's documentary, like mockumentary, but it's not found footage like Blair Witch.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different. I think better, but different. Sorry, she's mentioned that a couple times, and I'm like obsessed with that series.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So before we go, and before we all go find out where we can watch Kiki's Great Adventures, who has something to check in? Yeah. Oh, they're me. We'll start with me. Every Tuesday, go to University Magicus, my school, where you could very affordably learn all sorts of magic from people like me and Richard-Lael and about 18 other teachers, all at different paths. Wednesdays, of course, you're here. If you're anywhere near Arizona, April 12th through 14th, come see me at the Old Globe Paracon. And then jump on a plane and come with Father Sebastian and me to Romania in May. Lots of other stuff, but go to my website, pattinegri.com, buy some panties, buy some spellcaster, and buy some from the same place you can get to Witches Movie Coven stuff. So join us in everything. We're still working on the Black Goat, right? I think. Anyway, so that's me, pattinegri.com. Join me. I'm going to be all over the country all year. Sign up for my newsletter. Okay, who wants to go next?
Me.
Jason? No, Courtney.
Me. I'm Courtney Buckley. That's me. Ghost Bait on Scared and Alone. We have a new episode coming out on Friday. That's horrifying. You can find me. I love that doll. You can find me on all the socials at The Themes. You can watch Scared and Alone at scaredandalone.com or at Scared Alone Live on all the socials. I am going to this horrifying place and I'm going to be really scared. And I'm still waiting on my brown power panties so I can order those.
Yes. All right. Now, Jason.
Next week, I will be at Pagonicon in Minneapolis, Minnesota with Heather Greene. That's very exciting. And then, like, just 2 weeks later, I will be at Sacred Space, which is near Baltimore, Maryland, in April, the Pagan Unity Festival in Tennessee. And then my first and possibly last ever trip to North Dakota at the end of May. So very, very exciting spring coming up.
That's beautiful. Richard-Lael.
Well, you can find me here in New Orleans, thegentlemanpsychic.com, though I don't really actually check my emails very frequently. It's best to find me on the medias of social. You can find me teaching at Magic U. I teach on Saturday mornings, and then of course Scared and Alone, and yeah, all kinds of stuff. Also, you can buy the Devil picture. You could buy paintings. I think they have them printed on things. I don't know, but Courtney displays them right there.
Wearing dragon power panties.
Patty's power panties right there.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Heather.
I will be at Pentagonacom with Jason next weekend. It's going to be a fabulous time. That's in Minneapolis. 3 days of witchy stuff. And then in events in, Atlanta, Mystic South, getting ready for that. We're in the planning stages. That's in Atlanta in July. And I'll talk about the Oz convention later on in the year, because that's not until I also, just to let you know, had a new article come out on Religion Unplugged. If you're interested in how the Catholic religion influenced American film and culture, it's a short little take on that. So go ahead to Religion Unplugged and you can read my latest article, as I am a journalist covering these type of things.
Thank you so much. On going back to social media, I am still hacked on Facebook. My pro page is up, but I can't not get to it. But there are fake Patti Negris already popping up, and they are already contacting people. It is not me. It is not me. They're going to ask you for a reading. I never, ever, ever will have or would do that. It is not me. I am still legitimate on Instagram and TikTok, though there's a million fakes of me on TikTok. But you can get to my real ones from my pattinegri.com. But I'm sorry, fake Patties are pecking up all over Facebook. I can't get on because they didn't recognize my face and video and driver's license. But some guy in his tidy whities in a foreign country is getting on as me. So don't give him your money, please.
Yes.
And we have one more thing, because it is that time of the day. I guess we have to cackle because I can't think we can all go get high and kill people. So
I mean, I could. I really could. I actually could.
Probably me too.
all right. 1, 2, 3.